There are many published adventures for Dungeons & Dragons from both WotC and third-party creators. So, if you want to run an adventure, you can pick one of these up and hit the ground running. Sort of. But what if none of the published adventures fit the style of game you want to run? Or you don't like the setting or ending? Well, that's where homebrewing your own adventure comes into play. This video is in response to a comment from one of the members of my Discord server who didn't like the quality of a one-shot he found and was wondering how to homebrew an adventure and a campaign. Hi, my name is Rich and I'm a first-time DM. Let's look at a few tips for homebrewing an adventure and a few things to avoid. I will cover homebrewing a campaign in a later video. First, we need to understand what I mean when I say adventure. An adventure is a set of encounters with a specific goal in mind. Obtaining an item, defeating a specific creature, rescuing an NPC, etc. Usually, an adventure will include all three pillars of play within D&D: social encounters, combat encounters, and exploration encounters. You don't always have to include all three pillars in your adventure, but in my experience, adventures that do include all three seem more balanced and allow all players at the table to do something they enjoy. Though a good old dungeon crawl with nothing but combat encounters on the way to obtain some MacGuffin will always have its place within D&D. An adventure can be a string of encounters that will complete in one session, aka a one-shot, or a string of encounters that will complete over many sessions. As long as the encounters are tied together in some way, and one encounter leads to the next or back to the main thread of the adventure, I consider it part of the same adventure, no matter if it takes one session or 30. A campaign is generally many adventures tied together, with some random encounters thrown in to fill in any gaps. Side quests are basically adventures, usually smaller than the main adventures of the campaign. First, a note. Some of these items may not apply to a one-shot, as those are generally more railroady than a full-length adventure. Sometimes, to get a one-shot completed in the time set aside for it, the DM has to be more heavy-handed when it comes to the sequence of events, outcomes of social interactions, etc. You spent many hours creating the adventure. However, once you got it to the table, the dice and the players had their own ideas of what was going to happen. So now you're left with a choice. Go with what the players and dice want to do, or force your story and sequence on the players. Always go with what the players want, within reason, of course. Forcing the players to do what you had pre-written is considered railroading, not counting one-shots, of course. As a DM, there will be times you have to adjust your encounter, adventure, or campaign due to player decisions or die rolls. Sometimes on the fly in the moment, or hopefully with enough time to make the adjustments before the next session. Change your world as needed based upon players' actions and decisions. Be willing to toss an encounter you created into the trash because the players went left when you thought they would go right. Or if the encounter is generic, you can reuse it in an adventure down the road with any necessary tweaks, or turn it into a quantum ogre and just move the encounter from the right to the left. However, don't turn a town or a setting into a quantum ogre. If the haunted castle was on the path to the right, or a town was to the right, leave it there, and either the party will come back to it, or it is something that just never gets used. Only turn a generic encounter into a quantum ogre. For example, a goblin ambush could easily become a quantum ogre and move from the right path to the left. Of course, if running a one-shot, this rule does not apply. If your players veer from the one-shot path, simply move everything as needed. It is a one-shot after all. You don't have time for them to eventually make their way back to where they needed to go or to find the clue they need to complete the one-shot. I get it. You want to create a world full of lore, with all cities fleshed out, all deities created, and all dungeons and adventures for the campaign figured out. But you don't need all that. You only need to have ready what the players will interact with in the next session, and maybe the next few sessions as well. There is no need to create a city across the world from where the players are. Don't waste time creating things that the players may never interact with. Don't skip details. The more details you have, whether it's the backstory of a tower in the distance, the weather, or the sights and sounds and smells of a dungeon, leads to further immersion by the players. However, there is such a thing as too many details. Don't be too in-depth. Don't be like Robert Jordan and take thousands of words to explain what the mountains in the distance look like. No offense to Mr. Jordan, the Wheel of Time was amazing. There is such a thing as explaining too much. You need to find the balance in making the players care about a location or an NPC, but don't want to bore them and make the game take forever. Having in-depth lore for out of game to help you know more about the world is different than a massive lore dump in game. Find a balance between details that make your world better and what your players need to know. Things to consider. There are key things you should consider when creating the adventure. I use the following questions when creating an adventure, which help guide the creative process and ensure I don't leave something out. Keep in mind, this is how I create an adventure. There are many ways to create an adventure, and in reality, none are wrong, provided at the end of the adventure, you and your players enjoyed it. How many sessions to completion? The first and most important question is how many sessions you want or have for the adventure to take place in. The number of sessions for an adventure doesn't matter to me, as it is all part of a larger campaign. However, if you only have 3 or 4 sessions to complete the adventure, or just one 4-hour session for a one-shot, you will need to answer one more key question before beginning to create the adventure. How many encounters will be needed? If you are running a one-shot over a 3 to 4 hour session, 4 planned encounters with 2 additional random encounters if needed is usually perfect. If you are not running a one-shot, but instead a multi-shot, an adventure in 2 or more sessions, or adding an adventure to your campaign, ask yourself, how many encounters does your party normally get through in a session? Remember to count combat, exploration, and social encounters. I have found that sometimes social encounters and party planning take more time in a session than combat. If you don't account for this, you can run long or take more sessions than you wanted or have time for. If your party normally manages to get through one combat along with one other encounter, social or exploration, this means you need to build your adventure with no more than 2 encounters per session. So, if you only have 4 sessions to complete the adventure, do not create more than 8 encounters, and I would shoot for 6 planned encounters with a couple random encounters on standby just in case. The more sessions you have to complete the adventure, the more in-depth your encounters can be, and the more encounters you can have. In my campaign, I have run adventures that took 2 sessions to complete, and others that took 10 sessions. A massive Underdark dungeon crawl. Now you know how many sessions and roughly how many encounters you need, you can start homebrewing the adventure. What is the goal? The first question in creating an adventure is determining what the goal of the adventure is. Is it to recover the long-lost artifact of the Lich before his minions find it? Is it to rescue the nephew of one of the party members? Is it to find and stop the creature that is terrorizing a farm outside of town? These are all examples of goals from adventures from my campaign. The goal will help determine the answer to the following questions. Where will the final encounter of the adventure be? If you know what the goal of the adventure is, you can decide where the final encounter of the adventure will take place. Was the Lich's artifact taken into the Underdark and now resides in a Mindflayer city? Is the Bard's nephew being held hostage by the Thieves Guild and will only be set free if the party recovers an item the guild wants that is currently located in a cave in the far northern reaches of the continent? Is the large creature terrorizing the farm located in a forest north of the farm? Determining where the finality of the adventure takes place generally leads you to answer the next question. What locations are needed? An adventure can span several locations, such as a forest and a cave, the roads leading to the mountains which lead to the Underdark, the sprawling city streets leading to the sewers, etc. The locations will determine what encounters you will create and what creatures and NPCs the players will come across. Most encounters in an adventure should be tied to this main goal in some form or fashion. The shopkeeper has the primary clue the party needs to get out of them. The bandits ambushing the party should have a note from someone saying, "Don't let them live and you'll receive 50 gold each," etc. Random encounters are fine, but if there's a reason to the encounter, it makes the adventure as a whole make sense and is more believable. And the encounters themselves should make sense overall. Which makes more sense? Encountering a goblin ambush on a forest road or encountering goblins in the middle of the capital city? The forest roads, of course. Goblins are always setting up an ambush across forest roads after all. Goblins in the capital? That just leads to more questions. Why are the goblins in the capital? How do they get to the capital? Etc. If you don't ask yourself those questions, I can guarantee you your players will. Encounters that make sense without needing an explanation are easier for you to create. However, maybe goblins in the capital are exactly what you want, and if that's the case, great. Go with it. Just be sure the encounter makes sense within the adventure. An encounter like this just requires more work and usually needs other encounters to make it all make sense. Goblins just aren't in the capital. They have actually taken over the sewers and are working with a couple members of the Thieves Guild, etc. Types of encounters. There are 3 types of encounters: combat, exploration, and social. Combat encounters. Combat encounters are when the players will battle creatures or NPCs. There are things to consider when creating a combat encounter. Determine which encounters you want to be combat encounters. Out of the total encounters you will have, how many and which ones will be combat? When will those encounters take place during the adventure? Do you want one combat encounter a session? Do you want to stack a couple back to back? What creatures or NPCs make the most sense for those encounters? If you have 2 forest combats, 1 Underdark, and the final combat, what creatures or NPCs will be used for each? How are the combat encounters related to the adventure? Are they just random encounters, or is there a direct tie-in to the adventure? Was it just a bump in the road with some treasure? Will a clue be found amongst the bodies? Or will an item be found that can help the party later? Encounters that tie into the adventure will be more meaningful to the players. Social encounters are when the players talk with NPCs to get items and information. There are things to consider when creating a social encounter. Determine which encounters you want to be social encounters. Out of the total encounters you will have, how many and which ones will be social? When will those encounters take place during the adventure? Do you want one social encounter a session? Do you want to stack a couple back to back with the players having to go from the shopkeeper to the blacksmith to the bartender and then end up at the Thieves Guild leader? What NPCs have the items or information the party needs? Does the leader of the Thieves Guild have the information the party needs? Does the shady magic shop owner have an item that was obtained on the sly? Does the bartender know when the NPC the party is looking for was last in town? Do the players need to buy potions or other items, such as cold weather gear for the coming adventure? If the players will need specific items for the adventure, such as climbing gear or cold weather gear, be sure to have a shop for them to purchase them at, as well as the prices all set beforehand. And as always, have other items the players always ask for, such as healing potions, ready too. Determine how the players will need to obtain the info. Just pay for it, or will it be a discussion with an NPC that will require intimidation or persuasion rolls? Social encounters are easy to tie to the adventure. However, it can also be the easiest to send the adventure off the rails. Whether it is for information or an item, having the party find the NPC can be easy enough, and then you just need to determine how they get the item or information. Is the NPC nice to the party, giving information freely and items cheaply? Is the NPC trying to hide information or items? Just remember that the NPC has to eventually give up the item or information, whether it is through roleplay, combat, or the player's exploration of the NPC's shop or house. Make the information or item hard to get, but not impossible. Set lower DCs for deception, persuasion, or intimidation rolls for the players to convince the NPC. Lean more into the roleplay aspects of the encounter, and consider not even having the players roll any dice. Have a ticking clock so that there are consequences to taking longer to convince an NPC to give up the information or item. Exploration encounters. Exploration encounters are when the players explore the world around them. You have your basic exploration encounter of having to find the path through the woods, the sewers, or the cave system. However, finding the secret door in the throne room or the clue hidden in the dead NPC's house are also exploration encounters. There are things to consider when creating an exploration encounter. Determine which encounters you want to be exploration encounters, or to have an exploration part to them. Out of the total encounters you will have, how many and which ones will be exploration, or include exploration? When will those encounters take place during the adventure? Do you want one exploration encounter a session, or do you want to stack them back to back? Or which combat and social encounter will include an exploration encounter? Using skill checks to follow the path in the woods or sewers, survival checks, or to find the hidden door, perception or investigation checks, can allow certain classes to shine, such as rangers or rogues. And having a skill challenge, such as a chase through the woods, will have all players trying to use skills their characters usually ignore. Exploration encounters are easy to tie to the adventure. However, it just like social encounters, can also be the easiest to send the adventure off the rails. Don't have the players lose the path due to a bad dice roll. Just have them take longer to find it, or even get lost for the night, allowing their quarry to get a huge lead or even arrive at their destination. Hiding cool magic items or a ton of gold behind a secret door or within the hidden drawer in the NPC's house is fine, but don't hide the clue the party needs or an essential item behind a hidden door or drawer. For both social and exploration encounters, there is one thing to keep in mind, and I cannot stress this enough, and I've already mentioned it several times. Do not hide plot-relevant information or items behind a dice roll. If the dice are not in the player's favor, they may never get the information or item they need, leaving you to figure out another way for them to get it. Another thing to keep in mind about any encounter, just because you design the encounter one way, social, exploration, or combat, doesn't mean the party has to handle it that way. For example, designing a combat encounter, but including a way for the party to either bypass it or talk their way through it, leaves the solution to party decisions and not your pre-planned way. Just because you set up a bandit ambush doesn't mean the party can't sneak through the forest around them, bypassing the ambush, or maybe the bandits can be given gold to just let the party pass. Not all combat ends with a fight, and not every conversation with an NPC has to end peacefully. If the party kills the shopkeeper, let them explore the shop and find the clue the NPC was going to give them. An encounter that includes all three pillars of play, social, exploration, and combat, is the ultimate encounter. Just because you created an adventure doesn't mean the players will follow it immediately, if at all. So how can you get the players to begin the adventure? Create and deliver a plot hook. Plot hooks are the clues you give to your players. These can be of a more direct nature, where the gnolls raid the village and kidnap townsfolk while the players sleep in the inn. Doing this forces the players to immediately react. Do they fight the gnolls that remain in the town and then follow the trail to rescue the townsfolk? Or do they simply tell the mayor, good luck, and leave town? Indirect plot hooks can be clues given by NPCs, such as those given during a conversation with the shopkeep, or a note found on a dead bandit. The shopkeep can mention an issue with his trade route being disrupted, or a note can mention where the bandits were supposed to meet their boss. The more intriguing or urgent a plot hook, the faster the party usually follows it. The more vague or less immediate a plot hook, the chances the party never follows it increases. And if the plot hook is too vague or not immediate, there is a very good chance the players never realize they received a plot hook. And remember, there is a chance your players never followed a plot hook, or it is many sessions later when they finally do. Don't be discouraged if they don't immediately follow the plot hook. Set the adventure to the side and work on another adventure. The more plot hooks and adventures you have at the ready, the more options your players have, and that allows them to have agency, and the world seems immersive. They aren't just on a linear adventure. It will seem like their choices matter, and the world is theirs to explore. This was a hard video to make. How I create an adventure is going to be different than how others do it. I could have talked for hours, deep diving into my entire process, but I'm not sure many people would have watched that video, and I'm not sure I could have explained it well. My creative process is not the same as yours, so please, take these tips as you will. Use what makes sense, and ignore what you don't agree with. And as always, do what gives you and your players enjoyment. Every table and party are different, so what works for my table may not work for yours. Give me a thumbs up if you like this video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and ring that bell to be notified when a new video from me drops. Please leave a comment telling me how you create your adventures and if there are things you do or never do. Thanks, as always, to @KMarie. She is the artist behind the logos you see here, on my merch site, and my Facebook page. Be sure to join my Discord channel and check out my Facebook page and merch site. Links to those in the description. If you are a DM, check out my Dungeon Master Tips playlist for DM tips and top 10 list for DMs. The link's right over there. If you are a player, be sure to check out my player videos too. I also have a couple videos up regarding the new 2024 rules, so if you are interested in how the new rules are in actual play, be sure to check them out too. Thanks for watching. Remember to be kind to each other, accept each other, and love each other. Now let's roll some dice.